WLD audio, Biochar, the soil sponge that changed how I think about fertility. If I could only keep one soil amendment besides compost, it would probably be biochar. Not because it is magic, not because it replaces good soil, good mulch, compost, manure, minerals, or healthy plant roots, but because biochar changed the way I think about soil. It made me stop thinking of fertility as something you simply add, and it made me start thinking of fertility as something you build a home for, a place where nutrients can stay, a place where microbes can live, a place where water can be held, a place where the soil becomes more stable over time. And for me, that is where biochar becomes interesting, because biochar is not really a fertilizer. It is more like soil infrastructure, a long-term framework inside the soil, a kind of underground storage system. And once I understood that, I stopped seeing biochar as just another garden product. I started seeing it as one of the most important soil building tools we have. The story of biochar is much older than modern gardening. And one of the most fascinating parts of the story begins in the Amazon. When most people imagine a rainforest, they imagine deep, rich, fertile soil, huge trees, vines, leaves, green life everywhere. It looks like the soil must be incredibly rich. But in many tropical rainforests, the opposite is true. A lot of the fertility is not stored in the soil. It is stored in the living plants, in the trees, in the leaves, in the roots, in the constant cycle of growth and decay. Heavy rain can wash nutrients down through the soil quickly. Heat speeds up decomposition. Organic matter breaks down fast. Nutrients move. They do not always stay where plants can use them. So the rainforest looks incredibly fertile, but the soil itself can be surprisingly poor. And that is what makes terra preta so interesting. Terra preta means dark earth. It refers to patches of deep, dark, fertile soil found in parts of the Amazon. These soils are not just a little bit different, they can be dramatically different from the surrounding soil. Darker, richer, more stable, more fertile. And what makes them even more fascinating is that many of these soils were not created by modern agriculture. They were created by people, long before synthetic fertilizers, long before modern soil science, long before we had words like carbon sequestration, microbial habitat, or cation exchange capacity. People were building soil, they were adding charcoal, food scraps, bones, broken pottery, manure, ash, organic waste, layer after layer, generation after generation. And hundreds of years later, those dark soils are still there, still holding fertility, still showing us that soil can be made better, not just used up. That idea is powerful because a lot of modern farming and gardening is about replacing what was lost. Add more fertilizer, add more compost, add more water, add more inputs. But terra preta suggests something deeper. It suggests that people can create soil systems that hold fertility for a very long time, not just feed a plant today, but improve the ground itself. That is where biochar enters the modern story. Biochar is basically charcoal made for soil, but not all charcoal is biochar. And that difference matters. Charcoal is often made for burning, cooking, or fuel. It may contain things you do not want in your garden, depending on how it was made. Biochar is made with the intention of going into soil. It is usually made by heating organic material like wood, bamboo, crop waste, or nutshells with very little oxygen. That process is called pyrolysis, but you do not need to remember that word. The simple version is this. Instead of burning plant material all the way into ash, you cook it in a low oxygen environment so that much of the carbon structure remains. What you are left with is a lightweight, black, porous material, a kind of carbon skeleton. And under a microscope, it can look like a maze. Tiny holes, tunnels, pores, surfaces, little spaces everywhere, and that is the secret. Biochar is not valuable because it is black. It is valuable because of its structure. Think of it like a sponge made from carbon, but not a soft kitchen sponge. More like a hard, microscopic apartment block for soil life. It has places where water can be held, places where nutrients can attach, places where microbes can shelter, places where fungal threads can move through. It creates surface area, and surface area is extremely important in soil. A handful of biochar can have a huge internal surface area because of all those little pores. That means it can become a storage zone, a holding zone, a living zone. But here is the part many people get wrong. Fresh biochar is not automatically good for plants. This is probably the biggest mistake people make. They hear that biochar improves soil, so they add a lot of fresh, uncharged biochar straight into a garden bed or potting mix. Then they wonder why the plants do not respond well. The reason is simple. Fresh biochar can be empty. It has storage space, but that space may not be filled yet. It is like moving into a brand new house with no furniture, no food, no water, and no people. The house exists. The rooms are there, but it is not alive yet. In the soil, fresh biochar can initially absorb nutrients and moisture from its surroundings. That can be a problem if young plants are trying to access those same nutrients. This is why people talk about charging biochar. Charging biochar means soaking it, mixing it, or composting it with nutrient-rich and microbe-rich materials before you use it. You are filling those pores. You are stocking the pantry. You are inviting the microbes in before the biochar goes into the soil. There are many ways to charge biochar. You can mix it into compost and let it sit. You can soak it in worm tea, compost tea, or liquid fertilizer. You can mix it with aged manure. You can add it to a chicken pen or compost system. You can blend it with urine diluted properly, if that suits your system. You can mix it with food scraps, grass clippings, and other organic materials as they break down. The exact method matters less than the principle. Do not think of biochar as a fertilizer. Think of it as a battery. Before it becomes useful, you want to charge it. Once it is charged, then it can help hold fertility in the soil. This is especially useful in places with sandy soil. And that is one reason I find biochar so interesting where I live. In sandy soils, nutrients can move quickly. Water can drain quickly. Organic matter can disappear quickly. You can do all the right things, add compost, mulch heavily, feed the soil, and still feel like fertility is slipping away. Biochar helps slow that down. It gives the soil more places to hold on to things. It does not fix everything by itself, but it improves the soil's ability to hold what you are already adding. That is the important point. Biochar works best as part of a system. Biochar plus compost. Biochar plus mulch. Biochar plus manure. Biochar plus living roots. Biochar plus fungi. Bacteria, worms, insects, and thyme. On its own, it is incomplete. In a living soil system, it becomes powerful. That is how I think about it now. Not as a quick fix, not as a miracle product, but as a long-term soil building tool. When I use biochar, I am not expecting one dramatic overnight result. I am thinking years ahead. I am thinking about what that soil will be like after several wet seasons, after roots have grown through it, after microbes have colonized it, after compost has moved through it, after mulch has broken down over it, after plants have lived and died in that same space. That is where biochar becomes exciting. Because unlike soft organic matter, biochar can remain in soil for a long time. Compost is wonderful, but it breaks down. Mulch is wonderful, but it breaks down. Manure is useful, but it breaks down. Green material is valuable, but it breaks down. Biochar is different. It is more stable. It stays behind. It becomes part of the soil structure. And that is why I think of it as infrastructure. Compost is like food. Mulch is like a blanket. Manure is like a nutrient boost. Living roots are like the engine of the soil. But biochar is like the storage system. It helps the soil keep more of the good things you are already putting in. For edible gardens, that matters, because we are constantly asking a lot from our soil. Bananas are hungry. Dragon fruit needs strong, well-drained, biologically active soil. Leafy greens want steady fertility. Fruit trees need long-term support. Tropical and subtropical gardens can produce a huge amount of biomass, but they can also cycle nutrients very quickly. So anything that helps stabilize that system is worth paying attention to. And biochar is one of those tools. I also like biochar because it connects old knowledge and modern science. It is ancient and new at the same time. People were using charcoal-rich materials to build soil long before we understood exactly why it worked. Now science can help explain the mechanisms: surface area, porosity, nutrient retention, microbial habitat, soil water holding, carbon stability. But the basic idea is very old. Turn waste into long-term fertility. Take plant material that might have been burned away or lost and transform it into something that helps the soil for years. That is a beautiful idea. It feels practical, it feels respectful, It feels like the opposite of waste. Of course, biochar can be overhyped. Almost everything in gardening can be overhyped. People love a miracle product. They want one thing that fixes everything. But soil does not work like that. Soil is a relationship between minerals, organic matter, water, air, roots, fungi, bacteria, insects, worms, climate, time, and human management. Biochar is only one part of that relationship, but it can be a very useful part, especially when it is made well, charged properly, and used in the right amount. You do not need to turn your whole garden black. You do not need to add massive amounts. Small, repeated additions are often more sensible. Add it to compost. Add it to potting mixes in modest amounts. Add it around long-term plantings. Add it where you are already building soil. Let it become part of the system gradually. That approach feels more natural to me. It is not about dumping in a product. It is about slowly improving the soil's capacity. One of the simplest ways to understand biochar is this. Imagine pouring water onto beach sand. The water disappears fast. Now imagine that sand has compost in it. It holds more. Now imagine it also has clay, organic matter, roots, fungi, and charged biochar. Suddenly the soil has more structure, more holding power, more life, more resilience. That is the direction we are trying to move in. Not just feeding plants, building soil that can hold life. And that is why biochar keeps coming back into my thinking. Because the older I get and the more I grow, the less interested I am in quick fixes. I want systems that become stronger over time. Gardens that get easier because the soil is improving. Food gardens that do not rely completely on constant outside inputs. Plantings that can handle heavy rain, dry spells, heat, and neglect better than they could before. Biochar fits into that bigger picture. It is not the whole answer, but it is a very good piece of the puzzle. And maybe the reason I like the story of Terra Preta so much is because it reminds us of something hopeful. Soil is not just something we inherit. It is something we can build. We can make poor soil better. We can take waste and turn it into fertility. We can create systems that last longer than one crop, one season, or one project. That is the part that stays with me. Biochar is not just burnt wood. It is a reminder that good soil can be designed. It can be built intentionally. It can be improved by people who observe, experiment, and work with natural processes instead of against them. So if you are new to biochar, I would keep it simple. Use clean material, avoid treated timber or anything contaminated. Do not confuse barbecue charcoal with proper biochar. Crush it to a practical size. Charge it before adding it to soil. Start small. Mix it with compost, manure, worm castings, or other living materials. Then watch what happens over time. Not in 1 week, not in 1 month, but over seasons, because that is where biochar belongs. In long-term thinking, in soil building, in the slow work of making land more alive. For me, biochar is not about chasing bigger plants tomorrow. It is about building better soil for the future. And that is why, out of all the soil amendments I could talk about, this one still captures my imagination. Because it begins with fire, but if we use it well, it ends with life. We hope you enjoyed this WLD audio. We create these audio videos so you can listen and learn more about the crops you grow while you're in the garden or on your path. I hope this was useful for someone out there.